We're going to talk NFL training camp storylines. This is the time, Ben, where we finally get to see some football. Whether it's pads, no pads, helmets, or no helmets, we get to see people toss around the pigskin and hit a little bit, and we get to overreact about certain clips about Aaron Rodgers throwing a dime to Garrett Wilson, or Jamar Chase holding out, or CeeDee Lamb holding out, and stuff like that. So many storylines. So I'm gonna throw it to you. What's been the most intriguing NFL training camp storyline that you first want to bring to attention in this segment?
Yeah, so I find it very interesting and fun, and for me to be able to paint the picture to someone who has not been to training camp, especially as a member of the media. So over this past week, when I was at Arizona Cardinals training camp, there's a certain amount of things you do, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but when you're in the Cardinals' house, you play by the Cardinals' rules. So everything that's reported upon, or everything that has been filmed, is only the first 20 minutes of practice, as well as you can only post 90 seconds worth of content each day from Cardinals practice, in terms of actual practice, not the press conferences. Those are free game. And so when you're there, you're able to get an up-close and personal look, but you can't report or film anything after that 20 minutes. And they'll come over and tell you, they're very polite about it, but they'll tell you, all right, the open part of practice is closed. You can still stay, but you can't film. And so when I was there, it's kind of nice because when you're filming, you're just trying to get anything, right? You're trying to get Kyler throwing a go ball to Marvin Harrison Jr., and you're able to pick up on a few things. Here's what I'll first say about Cardinals training camp. Max Melton, the cornerback for the Arizona Cardinals, we talked about this last time I was on. He looks like a pro. I'm not going to come out here and say he's like, remember Brandon Williams years ago? We thought he was going to be Patrick Peterson 3.0 from what we were hearing.
Texas A&M.
Yeah, what we were hearing out of practices and at training camp. I don't want to go crazy with that because that's insane. But Max Melton, if he can be Sean Murphy Bunting, level caliber of a cornerback in the NFL, that will save the Cardinals a lot of grief. You add that with what I've seen and heard about Garrett Williams in camp. Garrett Williams looks good. If people remember, last year, he was coming back from a torn ACL from Syracuse. He should have been a higher overall pick, but he tore his ACL. He's looked really good in training camp. The cornerback room, which looked like it was going to be something of a wobbly position for the Arizona Cardinals, now looks like it's not going to be a strong suit. I'm not going to argue to anyone this Arizona Cardinals defense is going to be elite, but it's not going to be a clear liability to my eyes. We had Marco Wilson and Starling Thomas out there last year, and Keitrell Clark, who flashed at times. But these are just kind of the observations I've made at camp. So I'm curious what you think, and then I'll go to the next thing that I was kind of thinking of. If the Cardinals have three guys that they can start, whether it's in nickel sets or in dime sets or whatever, a sub corner, whatever it is that something that is a real deal thing for the Arizona Cardinals, or does it really not matter because their pass rush still is yet to see guys that flash?
I'm 50-50 on it. I think in a league where there's so much offense and so much wide receiver talent out there, I think it's really impossible to stop wide receivers on the outside. But I think the pass rush has got to be something that they have to get better at. With inexperience and with a young cornerback room that they do have with upside, like you mentioned, with Garrett Williams, who had some injuries last year, and this is the guy that was the third-round pick that even guys like Adam Schefter and some of those reporters and NFL draft insiders out there said, if this guy didn't have a lot of injuries, this guy could have been a first-round pick. Same with Max Melton. You may be a little under-recruited coming out of high school, goes to Rutgers, and then him being at Rutgers not getting that much attention. And when they did draft him, like you mentioned the last time we did the show together, you didn't really know a whole lot about this guy coming out of Rutgers. And then once you see his film, once you see what he did against Marvin Harrison Jr. against Ohio State, this is someone that you want to gravitate towards, and this is someone that embodies what Gannon wants, is violence, a guy that's not afraid to do whatever. And he's 5'11", he's a little small. Him and Garrett Williams are the same way, but you've got guys that are aggressive and got some guys that are dogs that are going to be somebody that are going to have to fill some shoes and that are going to have to be in bigger roles. And I think for Max Melton and Garrett Williams, you got them on smaller contracts. You got Sean Murphy Bunting on a smaller contract. And you want to talk about a market that's really tough to figure out is the cornerback market. There's not a lot of good cornerbacks in the National Football League. And I think with a young group that can grow together, a young group that can develop, I like what they've got over there with Garrett Williams and with Max Melton. And it's really it feels good, us two being Cardinals fans and media members that like to cover the Arizona Cardinals. It's rewarding when you see those guys like Max Melton who are coming in, and his brother Bo Melton's on the Packers too. So having a guy that has a brother that's been in the league, that knows what the NFL is about, that can come in and make an immediate impact is going to be huge, plus for the Arizona Cardinals this year.
Yeah, and I'm kind of just jumping all over the map here with position groups and things that I saw over the past week at training camp. And I'll be there next week, Thursday, Friday, potentially Saturday as well for the red and white scrimmage. The running back room as well is so much deeper than it was last year. Do you remember when James Conner went down and Keontae Ingram was getting carries? I
think it's Amari DiMercado.
Now, Amari DiMercado was a surprising player last year for
undrafted.
Because he was undrafted, right? He was just coming in, and honestly, at times he did flash. And then Michael Carter showed up. He helped bolster that running back room as well. I understand it's running backs, and we have a certain feeling towards running backs now in the NFL. But it's not just James Conner. Amari DiMercado, who flashed at some points last year, is probably not going to make this roster. So James Conner, Michael Carter might not make this roster. That's how deep it is this year. So whether it's James Conner, who we know is just going to miss a couple of games every year, Trey Benson is there to back him up. Potentially a Michael Carter could be there as well. I'm very intrigued, and I am pleasantly surprised, getting my eyes on those players up close and personal, how much better they're going to be running the football last year, in which they were already pretty good when Kyler Murray came back. That's something that I think is maybe a little bit smaller, but the details are what matters. And so the running back the room looks better. The cornerback room looks better. And looking at these wide receivers, this team, it's hard to say deep because their talent level isn't, it's not crazy off they don't have two number ones like potentially the Eagles and the Niners have. But they do have a clear number one. Zay Jones might be this team's number 2 wide receiver. I love Michael Wilson, and he's still a threat on the perimeter, but the injuries have been there. He has flashed at times. Zay Jones is just a pro. He looks really good, which is such a great problem to have for the Cardinals. Greg Dortch, we saw what he can do in a little bit of a limited role as a slot guy. Trey McBride. This Cardinals offense is going to be a top 10 offense this year. I don't even think I don't think potentially a top 5 offense is out of the question. I know it sounds crazy, Jackson, but looking at these guys, looking at this team, they're deep offensively. They have issues on the defensive side of the ball, but just from what I've seen for the first for the first week at camp, they look good. Is it insane to think they could be a top 5 offense this year?
No, I don't think so at all. I think it all starts with the offensive line, like you mentioned, the running back room. I think Michael Carter does make the roster as the third running back with how much they like to run the football. I have a hard time believing that they're going to have have 2 running backs on the roster for a 53-man, especially with how much they value the running game. But look, there's a lot of upside. There's low expectations, which I like coming in. But the more important thing, which I'm really intrigued to hear what you think about this, you being at training camp, those that have followed the Arizona Cardinals for a long time know the culture change that we're starting to see in this franchise. And I think culture change the word culture doesn't get talked about as much, and it's not valued because we look at stats, we look at, numbers all the time, and we look at what's in front of us. But the things behind the locker room and what we've been seeing, the leadership change we've seen from Kyler Murray, the leadership from Jonathan Gannon, the locker room, and the want of these players. Like all week long, I've been looking at press conferences and watching all these interviews, and you mentioned Zay Jones, which hearing an interview from that guy, how could you not like Zay Jones? Zay Jones was offered more money from the Kansas City Chiefs, from the Tennessee Titans, from the Dallas Cowboys, and he decided to come here for Kyler Murray and what they're building here. And he said the moment he walked in the building, he could tell the culture change in this. The culture is a culture that he wants to be a part of, the building that he wants to be around, and it's a room that it's a building that is leaning towards a Super Bowl, and that's something that we wanted. That's something that we wanted to see from Gannon and from Monty Ossenfort for years. That's what we wanted to see from this team: is the effort, the wants, the guys hanging around each other and wanting to be around each other and wanting to play. You mentioned on your show that teams with a lot of drama around them don't tend to do well in the NFL.
Yeah, a lot of off seasons lead to noisy regular seasons.
This is the first off season in the first season I can imagine in probably the last 3 off seasons that there's been no drama. Last year, we saw the Arizona Cardinals always in the headlines with Kyler Murray, with Budda Baker contract holdouts. There's no holdouts, and everyone that you've seen, every single interview that you listen to and watch, it's, I love being around my teammates. I want to be here. We need to get better. Like, when you were at training camp, did you feel a difference in culture?
Yeah, so it's hard because this is my first year actually going to training camp and getting that feel. But here's what I will say. They give off a very competent organization. I know I say things like you can only film the first 20 minutes of practice. They have these strict rules. I don't mean that in a bad way. The Cardinals want to use their content for themselves. I don't blame anyone for doing that. Now, I wish it was a little longer than 20 minutes because the first 20 minutes is a lot of it is stretching or go balls. It's not a lot of scrimmaging. When you get those, that's awesome to get, and that's like a gift to the media. Here's what I will say. The Cardinals will never be a debacle of an organization again with Monty Ossenfort and Jonathan Gannon. That doesn't mean that they're always going to be a Super Bowl team. In fact, I have my clear worries about them ever being a Super Bowl team because offense just runs the league now, and we don't have an offensive-minded head coach. They give off a Mike Tomlin, John Harbaugh organization. When was the last time the Ravens or the Steelers bottomed out? Now we know the Steelers are gone 8-8 or 8-9 or 7-9, but they're never 3-14, and that's what I believe the Cardinals are going to be. They will never be a diabolical, garbage organization that they've been. They finally have the right people in place in the front office. It seems like Michael Bidwell has finally gotten his filthy paws off these players and coaches like he was watching film with Cliff Kingsbury at times.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Jonathan Gannon has clearly established a culture and talking to the players, like talking to Sean Murphy-Bunting and James Conner and pressers last week. They were just, it was palpable. You could cut it with a knife. That's how much praise they gave upon Jonathan Gannon, and they were like having almost to defend themselves a little bit of the media when Jonathan Gannon kind of has these corny sayings, and they'll be like, when he breaks it down, because you're not in the locker room, when he breaks it down, it's a buy-in culture. They will never be a organization that bottoms out again. Now, will they always make the playoffs? No. But they're always going to be competent, and that's all you can ask for is a competent organization.